So we're in the thick of the legislative session now, and things continue at a pretty active pace, even though we had a massive snowstorm over the last few days. I was asked by a reporter from the News Tribune last night whether the snowstorm had impacted me at all, and I said, other than the fact that I had to sleep on the couch in my office for 2 nights in a row, that couch, here in my office, and other than the fact that I had breakfast of Pop-Tarts and Diet Coke for the last 2 days in a row, it really hasn't affected me at all. In fact, things continue at a really active pace, particularly as the legislature starts talking about trying to get people back to work. It's important not just because unemployment is high right now, but frankly, it is the smartest budget strategy our state has. If we can get people back to work, it makes the state's revenue picture look better, and it reduces demand for state services. When our state looks at economic development, it usually does so based on a sort of a three-legged stool, a three-part strategy that's focused on talent, entrepreneurship / business climate, and also infrastructure. And I want to talk really quickly about each of those. In the talent arena, right now the challenge is we've got about 60,000 unfilled jobs in our state in high demand areas like aerospace, computer science, nursing. And so a lot of the conversation in the legislature is about trying to kind of fill the pipeline and provide those skill opportunities so folks can actually fill those jobs and help our businesses and help our workers. So you saw, for example, 3 bills dealing with aerospace training passed in the special session, and a number of bills in that regard as well right now. Some efforts around nursing training and the like. Also a pretty active conversation around military families, either folks who are leaving the military and entering the civilian workforce, or family members of military members who are trying to tap into civilian jobs. The second leg of the stool is entrepreneurship and business climate. Let me give you a couple of examples of some of the efforts in that regard over the last year or two. Last year, if the state had done nothing, the average employer here in Washington would have seen a 32% increase in their unemployment insurance taxes at a time they could least afford it. And as a result, the legislature passed some reform bills that meant that this year, 88% of employers in our state have seen their business taxes, their unemployment insurance taxes go down. It's a savings of about $500 million to our employers over the next 2 years. Similarly, workers' compensation was an issue that a lot of employers were raising concerns about. Again, if the state had done nothing last year, the average employer would have seen a double-digit increase in their workers' compensation premiums. The legislature last year passed some reforms that continue to protect the interests of injured workers, but meant that as a result of those reforms, rates are flat this year, a 0% increase for the average employer in our state. You'll continue to see this session some conversations around trying to improve the climate for our small businesses and for our entrepreneurs. And then the third leg of that stool is infrastructure. Unemployment's at about 9%. In the construction industry, though, they've not faced a recession, they've faced a depression. About 35% of the workforce from our contractors have been laid off. In specific trades and specific areas of our state, unemployment is between 20 and 50%. Unfortunately, the state doesn't really have any capacity within its capital budget. And so we've been working on a bipartisan basis, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, on a potential jobs proposal that remains pretty skeletal. We're still trying to kind of put some meat on the bones, but it would be really focused on 3 priorities. 1, making investments that not only put people to work in the short term, but also bend the curve of our recovery over the long haul. 2, investments where we're going to make those investments down the road anyhow, so we could either pay now or pay more later. So these investments would be smart for taxpayers now. And then 3rd, investments that might save us some money in our operating budget so that we could reduce costs and again try to solve some of that operating budget challenge. We're looking at a model that's very similar to what gets done in the transportation budget, where they use revenue bonds. They basically bond against some of the dedicated revenue streams that go into transportation. We're looking at that as a potential option so that we can get some infrastructure investment to move forward. Again, the notion here is if we can see some of those development projects in our state, some of those private sector development projects move from red lights into green lights, it'll put people to work both on the construction end and help our economy recovery over the long haul. So those are the three legs of the stool. We're keeping at it, and I'll be back next week with another update.